We're looking from 1 Corinthians 13 as we think about the hard work of love. It says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Looking at what it means when it says love does not delight in evil, literally, how that's translated is love does not rejoice in unrighteousness. Love does not rejoice in unrighteousness. We're going to talk about what that means. Let's look briefly, though. Love does extend to the unrighteous. We're talking about the hard work of love, and love is hard work because the things that it requires are difficult: patience, kindness, envy. And especially when it talks about being able to extend love to those that we might not love emotionally. What it says is, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, this is Jesus' words, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. The reason why love is hard work, especially biblical love, is because of its breadth and depth. Love is to extend to those that we don't naturally feel like loving. We've talked about this before in the Bible. Love is not an emotion. It's a verb. It's something that you do, something you can take a picture of. It's extending care and help to someone you might not like is love. And that constitutes hard work. God sends sun and rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. He doesn't make a distinction. He doesn't withhold rain and sun from the unrighteous and extend it to the righteous. Those who represent him, he would have do the same. What does it mean when it says love does not delight in evil, and literally love does not rejoice in unrighteousness? Jesus talks about unrighteousness and truth elsewhere. And he associates unrighteousness with people, but he had a lot to say, and the Bible has a lot to say, with money. And in fact, it's described as unrighteous in the Bible. We have to deal with it. Money is necessary. We can't do without it. But the Bible describes it in a way as unrighteous. And let's talk about that. And how do we manage something like that? Here's what Jesus said: whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, that word for worldly wealth, it's literally translated unrighteous mammon. Mammon is a Chaldean word. It's a language that they spoke in those days. And it applies to, the root is that which is trusted in. Mammon is a word that describes that which is trusted in. And in this context, when Jesus used it, he personalizes it, almost turns it into a person. But he's talking about money and wealth and possessions. Jesus cast money as a rival deity. Look what it says in verse 11 of Luke 16. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, unrighteous mammon, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And again, the word money there is mammon. Jesus cast money and as a rival deity, and we find this elsewhere in the Bible. It says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. There's a what there. Keep your lives free from the love of money, be content with what you have. That's a tall order. How are we supposed to be able to do that? He goes on and says, well, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. It might be a little bit strange to think about, well, it's talking about the love of money, and then God says, I will never leave you and forsake you. So how do those things connect? God promises to provide and protect. And he would have us be mindful of that. He said, never will I leave you. We've talked about that. To leave is to untie. Picture a boat. Maybe some of you will be going up to the lake this weekend and you got a boat tied to the mooring. Let's say you lived on a river. And this word just that says, I will never leave, the image is untying that boat so that it's carried along by the current. So the boat is sitting there safe, and if it's untied, caught in the current, then there's nothing to protect it. It could go anywhere. And Jesus says, I will never do that to you. So he will bring you to a place where he will be able to overlook and see and protect, and he will never untie, so we are drawn away by the current of fate. He says, never will I forsake you. And the word forsake means to leave someone behind. We've talked about it. The Marines have a slogan, Semper Fi, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. And what it means for a Marine is that they will not leave a comrade on the field of battle. Always faithful, and that's what this word means. God will never cast us adrift or leave us behind. If we are in harm's way, he will not go to a safe place. He will stay with us. He'll always protect and provide for us, and he promises to do that. And so does money promise to do that. But it says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. God's name is a strong tower, calling on his name, because he says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. If we're mindful of promises like that, and we find ourselves in a threatened situation, either our checkbook balance threatens us, or we're challenged relationally or physically, God says, his name is a strong tower. Call out to him and be safe. But look what it says. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it an unscalable wall. Do you understand what that's saying? The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine, if I am standing behind a sufficient checkbook balance, this checkbook balance means that I will never be left or I will never be forsaken. So God makes promises and money makes promises. And what it suggests, though, only one can follow through. And that's the challenge. It says, cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. When we turn to God, he never leaves or forsakes. When we turn to money, it might seem to be real enough, but in the crunch, what Solomon indicates, and he had plenty of it, is that it flies off to the sky like an eagle. One thing that's challenging when we come to the Bible is that in the first half of the Bible, the Old Testament, God's blessings are something that you get to experience in this life by and large. It's when God blesses, there's land, seed, number of individuals that you give birth to, land, seed, and blessing. And you can see those things. They're now. So if you obey and you're blessed, you can see the blessing. That's why you can argue that God grants his children prosperity as part of his promises. You can argue that from the Old Testament, but you can't argue it from the New. After Christ, faith focuses on the far side of the grave. You can't argue for a prosperity gospel from the New Testament. It's just not possible. On this side of the cross, we have to trust unseen benefits. God makes promises. He says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. That will be true. It might not always seem to be true by what we look at with our eyes. That's why when we look at life, we look at reality, but we have to be mindful of promises. And that's what he says. Keep your lives free from the love of money. Be content with what you have. How? How in the world can we be content with what we have when somebody throws a $50 million wedding? And the way we do that is God makes promises. I will never cast you adrift. I will never leave you behind. We talk about this. I think these promises, these are ones, if there's go-to promises for me, these are the two. I think of them oftentimes. If I'm in a place where I feel frightened by something, you don't try to squish down the fear. What do you do when you're afraid? You know, we can try not to be afraid. That doesn't work real well. What God says, call on his name. And here's what he says, I will never cast you adrift, and I will never leave you behind. And be mindful of these things. They're not bulletproof, but over time, it will be easier to think of that way and not feel alone. Jesus says, and this kind of gets to the idea that we don't always see the benefits that he holds out for us. Jesus said, what good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his own soul? And it's an extreme thing. Let's say you rise to the top in your profession, absolute pinnacle. You can't go any higher. Family-wise, you have the kind of family and legacy that people dream of, possessions, money. Let's say you have it all. And what he says is that what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses, and the word is damages, hurts, injures his soul? To provide for the temporary vapor of this life and not consider the eternal balance of it. To get everything now, but not consider the eternal balance of life is not really good investing, is it? It's pretty brief. So what do we do with that? Again, what we're told here is to be mindful of the things God tells us. Think about them. Talk to him about the things that you're going through. Listen to him from the words, what you're doing now. Talk to others who talk to him. Talk and listen to others who listen to him. We'll think about what it means to cultivate, to the degree we can, connect with God. It won't always feel wonderful, but think about his promises. Could you remember those two promises? Do you remember what they mean? Never will I leave you. You remember what it means? Never will I cast you adrift. Never will I leave you, cast you adrift. Never will I forsake you, leave you behind. You could remember those promises. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. As we're mindful of these promises, it helps us to, what does it help us to do? We have an example in Moses. Moses was a child in the royal court in Egypt, and it's going to describe the decisions he made and how he put himself in harm's way. He stepped away from a really cushy life, and it's going to describe what he did, and it's going to describe how he was able to pull it off. Let's look at the what. Let's look at the what. We're going to notice three things that he did. Let's read it first. It says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. What he understood was that there are pleasurable things, there are pleasures in sin, but the problem is the pleasures fade. And what he understood, he chose to be mistreated rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt. How was he able to pull that off? We're going to find there's something else here, but we're going to go on and we're going to come back. He did a couple things. He made a couple of decisions that seem to speak to character. Look at the first thing. There's definitely commitment here, isn't there? There's definitely commitment. He refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He didn't live for himself. He determined that he would serve the interests of others. And he lived a life where he stepped away from benefits, a cushy life, and lived a life of sacrifice and investment in others who were in harm's way. Would you agree with me? That takes a great degree of commitment. Moses was committed. Not just commitment, his character. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt. He could have had it all, but he chose. And it's strange to wonder, why would he do this? He identified with his people, and from a character perspective, he could not see them be in harm's way and live a cushy life in Egypt. It wasn't part of his character. Would you agree? It's character here. Not just doing the right thing because it benefited him, but doing the right thing even though it cost him. And so there's commitment and there's character. These are good things to be able to have as things that guide us. And he had courage. He left Egypt not fearing the king's anger. He was able to put himself in harm's way in order to pursue doing right. Okay, there's commitment, character, courage. Those are three important virtues, aren't they? How was he able to do that? We have to dig a little bit here. It says he persevered because he saw him who is invisible. How was he able to pull this off? Commitment, character, courage. The reason he was able to persevere is not because he was committed, not because he had character, and not because he was courageous. He was able to persevere because he saw him who is invisible. We make decisions to be committed, to evidence character, and courage. The problem is it's hard to keep making those kind of decisions as time goes on. What do we need in order to continue to do the right thing? Well, what Moses did, he endured because he saw him who is invisible. Literally what it says, as seeing the one who is unseen, he endured. As seeing the one who is unseen, he endured. He focused on conscious contact with God. For him, there was some visible things that we can't touch, but can we connect with God consciously? Can we talk to him? Can we listen to him talk to us? Can we talk to others who talk to him? Talk to others who listen to him? I'm going to throw two equations up here. You tell me which one more accurately fits what we learn from Moses. Which one is it? Commitment, character, and courage lead to conscious contact with God. If you can be committed enough, if you can be courageous enough, if you can have enough character, you can experience conscious contact with God. Is that what it says? Is that the thrust of the story, or do we have to flip it around? You experience conscious contact with God. It doesn't have to be perfect. It grows over time. As that happens, it leads to commitment, character, and courage. Which one would you say sums up what Moses experienced? The first? The second? Seems to be the second, doesn't it? As seeing him who is unseen, he endured. Conscious contact with God, that's the focus. What should we focus on when we think about God? Let's say you say, okay, Mike, I'm in. I want to think about God. What is it that we should be mindful of? Here's what it says. Keep your lives free from the love of money, but don't focus on money. Be content with what you have, but don't try to force it. Listen to what God says. He says, never will I leave you or cast you adrift. Never will I forsake you and leave you behind. When we are mindful of God's promises, especially new covenant promises, and in new covenant promises, these are really good ones. As we are more mindful of these promises, you could be mindful of these, couldn't you? You know what he says to you? And think about your checkbook balance. Think about the state of the world, the frightening things that are happening. Here's what he says to you. I will never cast you adrift. I will never leave you behind. As we focus and little by little listen to these things, talk about them, be mindful of them, we end up being less frightened because we walk through life and we feel less alone. Let's stand for closing prayer. Father, thank you for promises. We find ourselves in difficult straits. We're threatened by things, physical things, emotional things, financial things. You don't prevent us from being threatened. What you tell us in the midst of threatening things is, be still. I will never leave you and never forsake you. That doesn't mean our fear goes. It means, though, that we hold on to our feelings and hold your hand at the same time. You don't promise to eliminate our reactions. It's not wrong to be afraid. It's a threatening thing. What you want is that we turn to you and be mindful of you, not in order to eliminate anything, but in order to endure it. We're going to experience tension in this life. Jesus did. He cried tears and he experienced fear. Not a sin. Thanks for your promises. I pray that we be more mindful of them. So as we, little by little, focus in on your promises, we'll find ourselves with a greater ability to be committed and courageous and of good character. Thanks for that. In Jesus' name, amen.